The general store smelled of sawdust and sugar when Virginia Carter walked through the door that September afternoon in 1883. Her worn boots barely made a sound against the wooden planks of Randsburg, California. She carried herself with dignity despite the threadbare calico dress that hung a bit too loose on her slender frame, her dark hair pinned back in a simple bun that had seen better days. The coins in her palm had been counted 3 times before she even left the small cabin she rented at the edge of town, but she counted them again anyway. Her fingers trembled slightly as she approached the counter where loaves of bread sat in a neat row. Thomas Turner had been loading supplies onto his wagon outside when he first noticed her through the dusty window. Something about the careful way she moved, the precise counting of those copper pennies, made him pause mid-motion, a 50-pound sack of flour still balanced on his shoulder. He was a tall man of 28, weathered by years of working cattle drives and managing his modest ranch in the hills above town. He had sun-bleached brown hair and the kind of blue eyes that had witnessed both the cruelty and the kindness the West had to offer. He had learned to read people quickly, and what he saw in this woman's face was not laziness or foolishness, but the quiet desperation of someone trying to survive with her dignity intact. "That will be 8 cents, miss," Mr. Henderson said from behind the counter, his tone neutral but not unkind. The old shopkeeper had seen plenty of hard times himself. Virginia counted the pennies again, her lips moving silently. 7 cents. She had only 7 cents. Her heart sank, but she kept her chin up. "I apologize, Mr. Henderson. I miscounted at home. I only have 7 cents. Could I possibly pay you the remainder on Friday when I finish Mrs. Patterson's sewing?" Thomas watched Henderson's face soften with pity, and something in his chest tightened. He had been on the receiving end of that look years ago, when his father's ranch went under after a harsh winter killed half their herd. Pity was sometimes necessary, but it always came with a price to one's pride. "Now, miss, you know I cannot do that," Henderson began, not unkindly. "I've got bills to pay myself, and if I started extending credit to everyone who asked—" "I understand completely," Virginia interrupted, her voice steady despite the flush creeping up her neck. "Thank you for your time." She turned to leave, and Thomas made his decision in the space of a heartbeat. He finished loading the flour sack, dusted off his hands, and walked into the store with the purposeful stride of a man used to making difficult choices. "Henderson, add that loaf to my order," he said, his voice casual as he approached the counter. "And I will need a few more items as well." Virginia froze near the door, her back still turned. "Sir, I cannot accept charity." Thomas did not look at her directly. Instead, he began listing items to Henderson, his tone suggesting this was purely business. 2 more loaves of bread, a sack of cornmeal, beans, salt pork, coffee, sugar, dried apples, and whatever vegetables you have that are still fresh. "Mr. Turner, that is quite a lot," Henderson said, his eyebrows raising slightly. "My housekeeper quit last week," Thomas said smoothly, the lie coming easier than he expected. "Ran off to San Francisco with a traveling salesman. Left my cupboards in complete disarray. I cannot tell what I have and what I need, so I figure it is better to have too much than too little." It was not entirely convincing, and all 3 of them knew it. But Thomas's tone suggested he would not appreciate being questioned. Henderson began gathering the items while Virginia finally turned around, her gray eyes meeting Thomas's for the first time. "You do not have to do this," she said quietly. "I am not doing anything except buying groceries," he replied, finally looking at her directly. "Though I do have a wagon outside and these supplies are heavy. If you happen to be walking in the direction of the edge of town, I would not object to the company." She studied him for a long moment. Thomas wondered what she saw. He was not the handsomest man in Randsburg. His nose had been broken twice and his hands were scarred from years of ranch work. But he kept himself clean, treated people fairly, and had built his ranch from nothing after his father's death 5 years prior. It was not much, but it was honest. "I live in the cabin past the old Miller place," she said finally. "I know it," Thomas replied. "I pass by there on my way home." The transaction was completed in silence, Henderson's knowing look ignored by both parties. Thomas loaded the supplies into his wagon while Virginia stood awkwardly nearby, clearly torn between gratitude and the discomfort of accepting help. As the wagon creaked forward, the afternoon sun turned the desert dust golden. "I should explain," Virginia said once they were moving. "I am not usually in such circumstances. I came here 6 months ago after my father passed. He claimed there was a family inheritance waiting, but when I arrived, I discovered he had been mistaken, or perhaps desperate enough to believe his own wishful thinking. I have been doing sewing and mending, but work has been slow. My... You do not owe me an explanation," Thomas said, keeping his eyes on the road. "Perhaps not, but I feel the need to give one anyway." She folded her hands in her lap. "I do not wish you to think I make a habit of accepting assistance from strangers." "I do not think that at all," he said honestly. "I think you are someone who has had some bad luck and is trying her best to manage with dignity. There is no shame in that." They rode in silence for a while. Randsburg was a hard-scrabble mining town built on the unfulfilled hopes of silver and copper. It was a difficult life, but an honest one. "Why did you help me?" Virginia asked suddenly. "You do not know me." Thomas considered the question. "When I was 23, my father died and left me with a failing ranch and a younger sister to support. A neighbor, old Mr. Chen, brought by supplies one day. He said he had over-ordered and asked if I would take the extras so they didn't go to waste. It was a lie, of course. He had spent his own money to help us." Thomas paused, guiding the horses around a rough patch. He said that accepting help with grace is sometimes harder than offering it, but both are necessary for a community to survive. He told me that someday I would be in a position to help someone else, and when that day came, I should remember how it felt to need it. "That is beautiful," Virginia said softly. "What happened to your sister?" "Married a banker in Sacramento 2 years ago. She has a baby daughter now and wrote me saying she is the happiest she has ever been." Thomas smiled slightly. The ranch turned around slowly. "I have about 300 head of cattle now. It took 3 years of backbreaking work, but we survived." When they reached Virginia's cabin, Thomas saw a small structure that had clearly seen better days. The roof sagged and the wood needed paint, but a small garden plot showed recent tending. Wildflowers in a tin can sat on the windowsill. "I will help you bring everything inside," Thomas said, climbing down before she could protest. The interior was sparse but clean. A sewing basket overflowing with fabric scraps sat near the window. Thomas tried not to notice the nearly empty cupboard as he began unloading supplies, but Virginia caught his expression. "It looks worse than it is," she said. Though they both knew that was not true, they worked in silence until the shelves were full. When everything was stored away, Thomas turned to find Virginia standing in the center of the room, tears streaming silently down her face. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. I apologize. I've been trying so hard to manage, and I suppose the relief of having food again is overwhelming. Thomas felt something crack open in his chest. When did you last eat a proper meal? She did not answer, which was answer enough. I have a standing arrangement with the boarding house, he said carefully. I pay for my meals in advance every month, but this month I accidentally paid double. Mrs. Wu said she cannot refund the money, but I could bring a guest any time I wanted until the credit is used up. Would you do me the favor of joining me for dinner this evening so that money is not wasted? It was another transparent fiction. It was another on e. Virginia looked at him with eyes that saw right through it, but she also saw genuine concern. You are a terrible liar, Mr. Turner, she said, a ghost of a smile on her lips. Thomas, he corrected. And yes, I am. But I am also hungry, and I dislike eating alone. Mrs. Wu makes the best pot roast in 3 counties, so will you join me, Virginia? Yes, I will, she replied, though I must insist this is the last time I accept such kindness without being able to repay it. Fair enough, Thomas agreed, though he was already planning how to ensure it would not be the last time at all. Dinner at Mrs. Wu's boarding house was a revelation. As color returned to Virginia's cheeks, Thomas realized just how beautiful she was when not weighed down by worry. Her eyes were intelligent, her hands were graceful despite the calluses from her needlework. My mother was a seamstress in Boston, Virginia shared over coffee. After she died, sewing became my way of staying connected to her. I had hoped to open a proper dress shop someday, but circumstances haven't aligned. She spoke of her father's restless search for fortune that led them across the West, only to find a grave and $23 to her name upon arriving in California. 6 months is not long to build a reputation, Thomas observed. No, but food does not wait for reputations to be established. She met his eyes. I am not telling you this to garner sympathy. I simply want you to understand that I am doing everything I can to manage on my own. What if it is not charity? Thomas asked. I was not entirely lying about needing help at the ranch. My housekeeper did quit, 2 months ago actually. The house is a disaster and I spend more time trying to figure out meals than I do with the cattle. I could genuinely use someone to help with cooking, cleaning, and mending. I could pay a fair wage. And Virginia studied him. Thomas, we both know you are inventing this position because you feel sorry for me. I am offering it because I saw a woman with skills I need, and I have resources she needs. It seems foolish for both of us to struggle independently when we could help each other. You would earn every penny, Virginia. I have been eating beans and hardtack for weeks because I cannot cook worth a damn. This would be a legitimate job. She was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she asked, what are the terms? 6 days a week. I will collect you in the morning and take you home before dark. I will pay you $3 a week plus meals. That is too much, Virginia said immediately. It is exactly what I paid Mrs. Jennings, and she did half the work because she was 70 and had arthritis. He held up a hand. Try it for 2 weeks. If you feel it is not fair, we will renegotiate. Virginia bit her lip. Practicality finally won. 2 weeks, but I keep my sewing work for the other ladies in town as well. They shook hands across the table. Thomas felt a slight tremor in her palm, a mix of nerves and determination. Something shifted in that moment. an unacknowledged spark that was more than just an employment arrangement. The next morning, Thomas collected Virginia at dawn. His ranch was situated in a small valley with a year-round creek. The house was a solid structure of wood and stone with a wide porch. "Lord have mercy," Virginia muttered upon seeing the interior. "I mean, this will take some work." "I warned you," Thomas said, embarrassed. "I am much better with cattle than housekeeping." As the days passed, Virginia transformed the house. She brought order to the chaos, and the rooms began to smell of fresh bread and savory stew. Thomas found himself inventing reasons to come back to the house during the day just to see her. They fell into a routine of shared meals and deep conversations. Virginia was well-read and witty. She had opinions on everything from politics to poetry. One afternoon, Mrs. Wu pulled Thomas aside in town. "That girl is falling in love with you," she said bluntly. Thomas nearly dropped his bag of flour. "What? No, she is just my housekeeper." "And you look at her like she hung the moon in sighs," Mrs. Wu poked him in the chest. "Life is short, Mr. Turner. Do not waste time pretending you do not care for her." Driving back to the ranch, Thomas realized she was right. He was in love with her. The realization felt like a missing piece of his life finally clicking into place. When he entered the kitchen, Virginia was kneading bread, flour dusting her cheeks. "Virginia, we need to talk," he said. She looked up concerned. "What is it?" "I have not been entirely honest with you about why I offered you this job," he began, his heart racing. "I did need the help, but Mrs. Wu made me realize I've been lying to myself. I am falling in love with you. I have been since that first day in the general store." He took a breath. "I know this is complicated because you work for me, but my feelings are not conditional. Your job is not dependent on returning them. You can tell me you do not feel the same, and tomorrow morning I will still come collect you. Nothing will change except I will stop pretending." Virginia stared at him. Then tears began to slide down her cheeks. "Oh no," Thomas said miserably. "I have upset you. Please forget I said anything." "You are such an idiot," Virginia said, laughing through her tears. "Thomas Turner, I have been in love with you since you invented that ridiculous lie about your housekeeper. You are the worst liar I have ever met, and the kindest man I have ever known. I was just so afraid of ruining everything." He crossed the kitchen in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. "Marry me," he said. "That is very sudden," she replied, smiling. "We have only known each other 6 weeks." "Then I am moving too slowly," he cupped her face. "I do not want a housekeeper, Virginia. I want a wife. I want to build a life together as equals." "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it." They were married 3 weeks later. Marie Henderson from the general store gave them a set of fine china with a note for counting blessings instead of pennies. Their marriage was a true partnership. Virginia's practicality and Thomas's hard work turned the ranch into one of the most successful operations in the region. Virginia eventually opened her dress shop, which expanded into 3 locations. They had 4 children, James, Rose, and twin boys. They never forgot where they came from. When neighbors struggled, the Turners were the first to offer help. They were passing forward the kindness of Mr. Chen. In 1898, on their 15th anniversary, Thomas showed Virginia a beautifully restored wagon in the barn. "You recognize it?" This is the wagon from that first day, she gasped. I kept it all these years, Thomas said. It reminds me of the day my life truly began. The best things often start with a simple act of kindness. By 1913, exactly 30 years after that fateful day, they sat on their porch watching the sunset. They were in their 50s now, their hair touched with gray. Do you have any regrets? Virginia asked. Not a single one, Thomas replied. Only that I did not meet you sooner. We both needed to walk our own paths before we could walk them together, Virginia said, leaning her head on his shoulder. I filled your cupboards without a word because words felt inadequate, Thomas whispered. I wanted to help without diminishing you. You did, Virginia assured him. You saw me as a person worth knowing, worth loving. No. As the stars appeared in the vast California sky, they sat together, holding each other close, still counting their blessings 30 years later on the ranch of Dustin Hart Western Tales. From counting pennies to building an empire, they had walked every step together, proving that the smallest act of kindness can indeed blossom into the greatest of loves.